Ritchie Blackmore has always had a dark and mystical image. He always wears black clothes and black shoes. His favorite time to work is nighttime. Ritchie once said, "I'm only going out when the moon's out. I don't get up to the sun anyway. I go to bed about 4 or 5 in the morning and get up at night." Actually, Blackmore started experiencing strange things very early on. In 1960, he began to work as a session guitarist for the English record producer Joe Meek, and he played guitar in the backing band The Outlaws. At one point, Ritchie and other members of the band started experiencing weird things and ghost visitations. Since then, Blackmore became interested in the occult and spirits, and he read some books about it. The Outlaws used to visit old haunted places where they had doors opening, lights going on and off, creaks, groans, and all kinds of noises. Actually, in the 60s, people were fascinated with supernatural horror movies such as The Innocents, The Haunting, and Rosemary's Baby. The movies were about paranoia, haunted places, ghosts and demons. Inspired by horror movies, some rock bands started to adopt the dark and scary image in the late 60s. This is what Dave Thompson wrote in his book Smoke on the Water, The Deep Purple Story, about Blackmore's relationship with Joe Meek. Blackmore actually rented an apartment from Joe Meek. Jeff Goddard, one of Meek's longtime friends and associates, remembered that Ritchie and his German-born wife, Margaret, attended seances with Meek, and they held long mystical conversations deep into the night. Goddard recalled the three of them were fascinated by the occult. Ritchie and Margaret's interest was more healthy, or at least it wasn't as destructive as Joe's. But they used to sit up all night talking, and they would scare the life out of one another. Margaret later spoke candidly of Meek's fears that he was being stalked by the spirit of Aleister Crowley, and she admitted that she was unable to alleviate those fears. A few words about Joe Meek. Joe Meek is an English pioneer of sound recording technology and record producer, mainly active in the early 60s. His composition Telstar was the first British record to be #1 in the UK and US, when he literally recorded in his kitchen. He was a one-man revolution, an outsider and innovator. He did everything his own way, refusing to be controlled by the powerful major labels, producing his own hits and leasing recordings to the majors on his own terms. He pioneered studio tools such as multiple overdubbing on 1 and 2 track machines, close miking, direct input of bass guitars, the compressor, and effects like echo and reverb, as well as sampling. While others recorded all the performers in one studio, playing together in real time, Joe Meek physically separated instruments and voices and treated them with echo and reverb, processing the sound through his fabled homemade electronic devices. Meek became fascinated with the idea of communicating with the dead. He would set up tape machines in graveyards in an attempt to record voices from beyond the grave. Meek believed that his flat contained poltergeists. Aliens were substituting his speech by controlling his mind, and the photographs in his studio were trying to communicate with him. By the mid-60s, Meek's lifestyle became extremely self-destructive, and his heavy consumption of hard drugs such as barbiturates, amphetamines, worsened his mental health. Joe was affected by bipolar disorder, paranoia, and schizophrenia. His commercial success as a producer was short-lived, and Joe gradually sank into debt and depression. On the 3rd of February 1967, Joe Meek took a shotgun, he shot his landlady, and then he shot himself. Now, let's go back to Ritchie Blackmore. In 1968, Ritchie Blackmore played in Deep Purple, and there he met Nick Simper, the very first bass player of Deep Purple. Nick was into seances, and Ritchie got into it from Nick. This is what Ritchie revealed in an interview. When the band started, Nick Simper was really into seances and did them all the time. I wondered what the hell was going on. I heard all these sounds like glasses smashing and became intrigued. It's the old story. Something that's dangerous gets you interested and you start getting involved. But I try to keep at a safe distance and I'm always well protected in that area. I've read more or less everything there is to know about it, but not that many people know enough to be able to write on the subject. They tend to repeat themselves, so I'm basically finding out for myself. I only wish that I was articulate and concise enough to be able to write my own book because I think I could quite easily do it. So that's how Ritchie Blackmore got interested in the paranormal. By the end of the 60s, Blackmore toyed with the idea of aligning Deep Purple with something dark and mystical, but Deep Purple was getting successful under its own musical colors alone. As Blackmore wears all black, people started to call him the Man in Black. In 1984, the British tabloid The Sun ran a two-page spread headlined, "He Looks Evil, Even Satanic."